So I've already provided you with some initial lecture notes, right? 2 PDFs at the first slot, when there was some discussion on network theorems, right? The common network theorems that I think has been taught in a previous course, right? And the lecture network theorem that was covered in this are basically the fundamental laws, like Kirchhoff's laws, then some fundamental network theorems, right? If I don't get any feedback from you, it's very difficult for me to continue. Just any one of you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So,
Yes.
can you see the screen?
Yes,
Screen
sir.
visible,
Yes, sir.
right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So coming back to the very fundamental point, why do we require these network theorems at all? Any idea? Why do we need to study these network theorems?
Sir, to simplify the circuit so that we can analyze it easily,
Right.
in an easier way.
There's a correct point, right? Because we never find a very simple electrical circuit. Every electrical circuit that we find in reality are very complicated. Okay, never do you find a simple battery source connected to a resistance other than a simple battery torch. All the networks that will be, or circuits that will be encountering will be complicated ones and complex ones. But if you look at the tools that we have, other than network theorems, are the series parallel combination of resistances or impedances and star delta conversion, things like that. Now, this will suffice only up to a point where the circuit is not that complex. But if the circuit becomes really complex, then it's very difficult to continue to solve these problems using these simple tools, right? Like this series parallel combination, deduction of star delta conversion, right? So for that we need some formulas or systematic ways of solving such problems or complicated problems. So for that, these basic network theorems have been developed and they're quite common. So what are the network theorems that have been taught? KCL-KB, I think it's covered in your previous semester.
Yes, sir.
Okay, very elemental things. Other than that, let's see. And what are the circuit analysis methods that are taught? Like, say, mesh analysis has been taught.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Nodal analysis, Thevenin's theorem,
Yes, sir.
Norton's theorem,
Yes, sir.
right?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
So all that been taught. So you might think that why I'm talking about these things again, because this will again be covered, but in a different perspective. Okay, we'll be analyzing some circuits and networks from a different perspective, that is from, say, in a transform domain. Okay, so we'll be using this network theorems in a transform domain to solve some circuit problems. Okay, so that's why I given you this note so that you can brush up your previous knowledge of these network theorems. And what type of book do you follow, D. Rai Chaudhuri, for solving problems? Anyone? Any book?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, actually, our other circuit theory teacher, RKB sir, told us to follow the D. Rai Chaudhuri book.
Okay, okay. And there's another book by Kuo. It's another Kuo book that may be helpful. Okay, so that's why I have given you some very easy problems that have been solved just to brush up your previous knowledge. Okay, mesh analysis and nodal analysis. Now, a very important aspect that you should always remember is that you may know all the methods of solving a particular circuit, right? Given a circuit problem, you can apply mesh analysis, you can apply nodal analysis, or you can go for Thevenin's theorem or Norton's theorem. But the objective of this course or any course is to get you to a point where you can judicially select your theorem or the method of solution. If you go, suppose given a circuit, if you go for node analysis, that might require very less number of steps. In the same circuit, if you apply mesh analysis, that might require much more steps. It may become laborious. It may lead to more number of equations than actually necessary. So we have to be judicious enough to make such choices, right? So that a particular problem can be handled efficiently with, if not minimum, less amount of mathematics or less amount of steps, because more the number of steps, there will be more chances of mistakes and all, right? So this is the first and foremost thing that you should keep in mind. Given a problem, you should not be inclined to apply a particular theorem. Say you are very much acquainted with mesh analysis. So given any problem, if you start solving it by mesh analysis, a situation may come that it becomes very complicated, whereas it can be easily solved using nodal analysis or using Thevenin's or Norton's theorem, right? So you have to find out the right way of solving the problem, okay? And this is saying that there is no substitute to hard work, right? But if you can choose a proper substitute in these cases, then you can eliminate hard work, right? But if you choose a wrong substitute, wrong method, then you have to go through a very hard work to solve a problem. But if you're judicious enough, if you choose the right method, then you can easily solve problems. So these things will come after a lot of practices. Since these are already covered in your previous semester, I thought it will be better for you to go through them, okay, and just brush up your knowledges. I'll go to it. I'll again go through them, okay, when I will be considering the method in a Laplace domain or transform domain, where you'll be solving using all these methods. That's why I'm not reiterating these steps. Just for your knowledge, I've given you this note so that you can just brush up your past knowledge, right? The Thevenin's theorem, Norton's theorem, everything is being covered in this note. Have you gone through it? Honestly, say honestly, yes or no? Silence means you have not gone through the notes, right? That's why I never thought, I never got any feedback from your side regarding the notes once I've given it. Anyway, so next let us consider a simple part. I don't think I have given, I don't remember whether I have given you or not. That is voltage and current sources. Actual scenarios in practical world, there is nothing called ideal, okay? But in theoretical terms, there are obviously ideal voltage and current sources. Ideal voltage sources means whatever load you connect across these terminals, sorry, the voltage, the terminal voltage remains constant, right? Just a second, someone's calling. ক্লাসে আছে, একটু পরে ফোন করো, 6টা না 6:30 পরে করো, ঠিক আছে? So since these are very hypothetical ones, it's very difficult to obtain a practical voltage source like this, where whatever with the load current, the terminal voltage remains same. In actual scenario, what happens? As you keep on increasing the load current, the terminal voltage falls. Okay. Now, I think you have a very vague notion about load. What do you understand by load? Increasing the load? Any idea?
Sir, the power intake increases.
Okay, that means what about the resistance? The resistance is increasing or decreasing?
Sir, decreasing, sir.
I thought I heard two answers. Increasing load means resistance?
Decreasing resistance.
Right, the current is increasing, right? Now,
Yes, sir.
Very common example. Suppose in your classroom only one lamp is on. As soon as you turn on another lamp, that lamp is drawing some current in parallel to that particular lamp, previous lamp. And since two lamps are in parallel, the impedances are now reduced, right? So the load current is increasing. So increasing load means your load current is increasing, or in other words, the impedance is decreasing. So in this case, why this voltage drop is actually taking place? This is due to this internal resistance that this practical voltage source has, because it's very difficult to have a source without any internal impedance or internal resistances. Okay, so this you should keep in mind, that nothing is ideal in the situations, so you have to have these ideas in play. I think these things are covered, right? These practical sources and ideal sources. Okay, now if we just a second. Something is not happening over here. Just a second. I think I have to quit. Okay. So this is the voltage sources, and this drop in voltage as a load current increases will give you an indication of voltage regulation. That is change in terminal voltage with respect to increase in load. Okay. Similarly, in current sources, what we have for a practical current, ideal current source, there is no internal impedance, and whatever be the load resistance, the current remains constant. This is ideal current source, this dotted one. But in practical situations, there will be an impedance or resistance in parallel to that. So that will draw some current, and that will lead to such practical current sources. And obviously, this intersection will give you the open circuit voltage when current is 0. And this will again meet somewhere. But in this case, open circuit voltage is much more. So depending upon the resistance of the internal resistance of the current sources, you have different nature of VI characteristics for the practical current sources like this. Okay. Now these things might come handy, this knowledge of these practical current sources and ideal current sources and voltage sources. Now obviously there are methods of converting a voltage source to current source, right? Given any voltage source with internal resistance RS with a terminal internal voltage Vs, it can be converted to a current source having a current Is given by Vs by Rs in parallel with the resistance Rs. So this is the equivalent current source as compared to this voltage source. So this conversion, how this conversion comes up, is quite clearly written over here. Similarly, any current source can be converted to the voltage source using the same method, Is Rs. So your Vs will be Is into Rs, and this internal resistance will come in series now. So this is how we can interchange any current and voltage sources. Now this source transformation may become handy while dealing with some particular network problems. Okay. So just keep in mind these source conversions. Another thing that will come in handy in some situations is the fact that the notation. See, there are 4 situations here. Just a second, I'll try to turn on that pen. Otherwise, I am difficult in marking. See, there are situations where this is a resistance and the current is coming in what is happening. The current is coming in through the positive terminal, right? So in these situations where the current is coming in through a positive terminal, it is said that this resistance is absorbing the power, right? Similarly, for a source, the current is leaving through the positive terminal. So in such case, we say the source is generating some power and then it's being delivered to some load or sink. See, in this case, if the current is flowing inwards, This is a voltage source. Obviously, this is a voltage source, but the current is flowing inwards from a positive terminal. That means in this case, the source is absorbing power. Okay. So this, when the current is leaving a source from a positive terminal, it is generating power. When current is flowing into the source through the positive terminal at any instant, it is then absorbing power. Similarly, if you can generalize this thing for any element, if the power is leaving the positive terminal, then it is generating the power. Now, if it is entering the element from a positive terminal, here it is a positive terminal, this is a positive terminal, and this is a negative terminal. If it is entering through positive terminal, then it is absorbing the power. So these notations might become handy while solving some network theorems. Understood this point? Any element, it may be a load resistance, it may be a voltage source, whatever. If the current is flowing inward through the positive terminal, instantaneous positive, then it is absorbing. If it is flowing outward through a positive terminal, then it is delivering or generating power. Next. Now, this so far we have discussed about sources that are independent. That is, it has an independent source. Say suppose a voltage source, it has an independent source of EMF in series with an impedance or resistance. But there are situations where we have some dependent sources. Okay, now what is this different types of dependent sources? Now, dependent sources means the voltages or the EMFs or the currents will depend on a voltage or current in any other part in the circuit. Okay, suppose this circuit. So these dependent sources are normally expressed in this fashion, which is rhombus like this. Okay, now here the source voltage is given as alpha Vx, where alpha is a multiplying factor and Vx is a terminal voltage, or not terminal, is a voltage across any two terminals in the network, which may be a part of that network or may not be a part of the network, but they are coupled in some way or other. Maybe they may be magnetically coupled, or they may be itself be a part of this particular network. So whatever be the value of Vx at any particular point or across any two terminals in a network, this Vx will be the EMF across these two terminals, where alpha is a multiplying factor, right? So this alpha will determine the value of the terminal voltage for this dependent voltage source. This is a dependent voltage source, and again, this voltage is depending upon this voltage, so it is voltage controlled voltage source. Similarly, if the terminal voltage is a function of current in some branch of that particular circuit, then it is called a current controlled voltage source. See, this is a voltage source, as a dependent voltage source, where the terminal voltage is a function of current in some other branch. That's why it's called a. So there are the two options that is left. That is voltage controlled current source. There is a current source where the current is a function of the voltage across these two terminals, which again may be a part of the circuit, and beta is a multiplying factor. So it's a voltage controlled current source. Again, if the current is a function of the branch current in any other branch of the circuit, then it is called a current controlled current source. So there are four options that we have in our hand. Obviously, it is quite obvious. If you look at it, voltage controlled voltage source, current controlled voltage source, voltage controlled current source, current controlled current source, right? So this again will become handy while solving some fundamental electrical circuits or some of the problems that we will encounter next. And I think in your PPTs that I have given, where I have tried to solve some problem, you have seen already that there are some voltage control sources there, right? Okay. Now we'll discuss about some fundamental network theorems. So apart from that Thevenin's theorem, Norton's theorem, and that mesh analysis, load analysis, node analysis, we have some other theorems that you may not have been covered in your syllabus. See the reciprocity theorem. Have you heard this theorem? Compensation theorem, Millman's theorem, substitution theorem, and Telegrams theorem. I'll try and cover as many as possible in today's lecture. Okay, I've already provided you with the notes related to this different theorems. So I'll just go through the same note. I've given you the same note. I'm just showing you the same note. So what is the reciprocity theorem? As the name suggests, reciprocity means something that is reciprocates. Okay, so for the reciprocity theorem to hold, what you require is a linear circuit. It should be bilateral. I guess you know what is a bilateral circuit, and preferably,
Yes, sir.
okay, and preferably it should be a single source network. Then the statement says the ratio of excitation to the response is constant when the position of excitation and the response are interchanged. Suppose there are two loops. In loop A, you have a source, and in loop B, you are measuring the corresponding current or voltage at a particular branch. Okay, across the branch voltage or the current to the branch. Now, if you simply interchange the position of the source and the branch, just interchange them, then if the same voltage produces same current, that means where say there are two loops A and B of a linear bilateral network, and an ideal voltage source is there in loop A that produces say a current I in loop B. Right now, you interchange the position. That is, you put the ideal voltage source in loop B. Okay, and measure the corresponding current in loop A. Your task check on. Someone is trying to join now. So then what will happen? So we have interchanged the position of the source, ideal voltage source, from loop A to loop B. And under such circumstances, if an identical source in loop B, that is voltage source, ideal voltage source E, produces the same current in loop A. The same current means the current that was produced in loop B, well, the same source was present in loop A. Then the network is said to be reciprocal. That is, you can simply interchange the position of the source and the sink or the measuring point. Then also the relationship remains unchanged. Then it is called a reciprocal network. Okay, so what are the basic criteria for a network to be reciprocal? That is, it should be linear, obviously. It should be time invariant. That is, there should not be any change with respect to time. Most importantly, it should be bilateral, and it should comprise of passive elements. Only one single source will suffice. Okay, there should not be any active elements. Right? If you put op amps or diodes in the circuits, then it will not be bilateral, and op amps will make it active. And since op amp has infinite impedance in one side, so you will not get the bilateral network. So in those situations, that is, this theorem will not hold. So these are the basic requirements that has to be satisfied for the reciprocity theorem to hold. Okay, coming back. Let us consider an example. See, say this is a particular network that is given. We have a source SE, E voltage source connected over here, and there are three impedances, and this is a source current IS, and I want to measure the current I here in the first configuration. Okay, in the next configuration, if it is a reciprocal network, then if we replace this E, that is, if we place this E in this branch, then this current should be same as this current. Okay, let us check whether that is happening or not. There is interchanging the position of the source and the branch where the current is being measured. For the first part, for this circuit, the expression for current becomes something like this. Sorry, I overshoot that. So this is the expression for current for the first case. Okay. So Z1, Z2, Z2, Z3, Z1, Z3. And E, Z2 is the current where this current I in response to this voltage source E. Now you have to show that if we replace this voltage source to here, then what about the current in this branch? Right? If it is same, then the network is reciprocal. If it is not same, then the network is not reciprocal. Let's check. Second configuration, if we calculate the current, the same method, you'll see that the expression for current in the second case, sorry, will be identical. See, EZ2, Z1, Z2, Z2, Z3, Z1, Z3. So even if you interchange the location of the current, sorry, voltage source and the measurement of current, then what you'll get, the current is same, provided the same voltage source is being placed in the other branch, or the position of the source and the measurement are interchanged. So this circuit is obviously a reciprocal circuit, and it follows the reciprocity theorem. Now there is obviously a condition that has to be satisfied, or a mathematical expression can be drawn for this reciprocity theorem. What is that? Suppose there is a network having only one driving voltage source. Sorry. And the driving voltage source is in loop K, and it produces a current in loop M. So you can write using that superposition theorem that this IM, the current in the loop M due to this source EK, in effectively can be written as YMK. This is an effective admittance between these two loops. So if you now interchange the position of this source, that is, if we put the same source in the loop M, then say it is EM, and it produces a current IK in loop K, then it can be again represented in this equation. YKM is the corresponding admittance. Now, for the system to be reciprocal, this IM should be equal to IK, and that necessitates the fact that this YKM should be equal to YMK. That is, for a system or for a network to be reciprocal, the admittance matrix should be symmetrical. For this, from one side to other, K to M and M to K should be same. So this is actually a theoretical development that can be proved. I think it is taken from DRC book. You can go for that to get more detailed understanding. And I've also provided with some additional maths and examples. You can just simply go through them. I'll not discuss this maths over here. Okay, since I have to cover a lot of things. In actual classes with physical interactions, this maths can be discussed. Okay, but in online mode, I would, since I'm not getting any feedback from your side, it's very difficult to go through this maths and wait for your response. So I recommend you just to go through this maths, try and solve them manually. I'll also provide you with some tutorial sheet. Okay, some more problems to solve with answers, so that you can check whether you are going the right track or not. So there are plenty of problems that are given And this is a tutorial that has been given. Okay, so this is a reciprocity theorem. Next, what we have, okay, just let me check. Itinerary, what was the next theorem that you had? Sorry. Next theorem has a compensation theorem, right? Let's see. Now, the compensation theorem is very interesting. Suppose in a network, there is a certain change in some of the element values. Then we have to find out the effect of that change in the entire network. Okay, what you can do, obviously, you can use superposition to solve for two different situations to find out any change in other network parameters, but that may not always be very much advisable. So what you can do, you can make use of this compensation theorem, and the basic fundamental is that whenever there is a change in a particular network, change means some element values have changed, or we have replaced some elements with some new elements, then there will be certain changes in various voltages and currents of the network throughout the network, right? So you have to make sure that at least for a particular branch, you can have an idea about the effect of the change that you have made in some element. So if you're interested in a change to measure the change of voltage and current in a particular branch subjected to some change in a parameter in other branch maybe, then you can use this compensation theorem. A very common example will be a change in the resistance value. Suppose you have changed the resistance value, or resistance value has deteriorated or changed due to some effect in the environmental effect or something like that. Then how the current or voltage will be affected, that can be easily calculated using this compensation theorem. Now, what is the statement? If you look at the statement, if the impedance Z of any branch is changed by delta Z in general, then the incremental current delta I, say, in that particular branch is that which would be produced by a voltage source. What is this voltage source? Vc equal to I delta Z. This is a voltage source, new compensation voltage source, where I is the previous current that was flowing through it, and delta Z is the incremental change in the impedance, right? So this has to be introduced in the same circuit, but with the condition that the polarity should oppose the original current. Because whenever there is some change in impedance, if impedance increases, the current will decrease. If impedance decreases, the current will increase. So that's why, to counter that, you have to put the compensation voltage source in such a polarity such that it opposes the original current, right? It's a very trivial thing. So obviously this compensation theorem is nothing but an extension of superposition theorem, and it requires the circuit to be a linear circuit. Okay, so these things are all related to linear circuits. Just see, for example, what is actually happening. Suppose we have a network like this. This is a actual circuit that we have, original circuit. This is a voltage source, the two impedances, Thevenin's equivalent you can say, and this is a current. Now, given this Thevenin's equivalent means given any branch, you can calculate this effect. So once this is given, suppose this impedance is now changed from Z to Z plus delta Z. So there will be obviously a change in the current in this branch. Now I have to calculate this delta I corresponding to this change delta Z. Now how that can be calculated using this compensation theorem. Let us check. Now, under such circumstances, what you can do first, I was VOC by Z plus Z Thevenin. Now, under change circumstances, I will be VOC by Z plus Z Thevenin plus delta Z. And this current will be different from the previous kind, obviously. There will be I plus a delta I component. Now, to calculate the delta I component, what you can do, you can have this equivalent circuit. See the equivalent circuit? This will give you only the delta I portion. See, this is Z Thevenin, right? This is your incremental resistance, Z plus delta Z. Then, this is your compensation voltage. What is the value? The current that was flowing through the circuit and the incremental change in the impedance. What about the polarity? See, the current is flowing in this direction in original scenario. So the polarity should be plus minus, so that it produces a current that tends to oppose the actual current, right? That is the notion, right? Understood this portion? So this is how the equivalent circuit according to the compensation theorem, and this will give you only information regarding delta I, and your effective current will be I plus delta I. Now this delta I may be positive or this delta I may be negative, depending upon your change in delta Z or polarity of delta Z, whether it is positive or negative. So obviously in previous case the current was this, and now with the change delta Z, the current is I plus delta I. So this current is nothing but this, as simple as this. Now delta I will be defined as I dashed minus I. So I dash, we know, is this, and I is this portion, the original current. So if you solve this, very trivial relations, okay? We're just following the simple equations. So after much deliberation, we'll find that delta I will become simply, after mathematical calculations, it will simply become minus I dz into Z Thevenin plus Z plus delta Z. Or you can simply write, if consider this as your compensation voltage VC. Since it is with a minus sign, you have to have a polarity opposite to that current, and this is the effective impedance in the circuit, right? And this confirms our initial equivalent circuit that we had earlier, like this: VC by Z Thevenin plus Z by dz del Z with a negative sign. See, what do you have? VC is I delta Z divided by Z Thevenin plus Z plus delta Z, but the direction is in this side. That is why it should be a minus sign. So delta will be minus VC by Z Thevenin Z plus delta Z. That we have again shown using the theoretical calculation with respect to that incremental change delta Z. Okay, so this is again an application of superposition theorem. Okay, and by this way you can easily calculate the effect of change in incremental impedance or resistance on branch voltages and currents, right? Suppose this example, say, let's take this example. This R in this circuit is changed from 4 ohms to 2 ohms, right? Same circuit. Now I have to verify that the compensation theorem will hold for this circuit. How? Say, first calculate this loop current, I1. This is 3/11 ampere. Now, once again, using the loop current method, sorry, this marker should be omitted. You obtain the two loop equations for this figure, for this first original circuit. So these are two loop equations, and solving which you'll get the other loop current I2 to be 1/11. So the current through this branch, this capital I2, will be I1 minus I2. So effectively it will be something like 2/11 ampere. Right? So this is the effective current flowing through the resistance when it is 4 ohms. Now if you change the resistance to 2 ohms, then what will happen? Again, for the figure, the same equations can be written. Sorry. This is a new figure now. See, the impedance is now changed to 2 ohms. Now you have to find out this I2. This is I2 dash. What will be the value of I2 dash? Say this I1, I2 will change, obviously. So this may not be the same I1 and I2. So let's see. Let us see what the value is coming out to be. For the second part of the circuit, if we follow that same procedure, you'll get your I2 to be 1/13 and I1 to be 5/13. So I2 dash will be simply 4/13. So the change or incremental change in the current, if you calculate, is 8/140. This is the value of current or delta I, right? Now if we apply the compensation theorem directly, then what will happen? See, your compensation voltage will be I2 into delta Z. The initial I2 was 2/11 and delta Z is nothing but -2, that is change. So VC is minus 4/11 volt compensation voltage. So what you have to do, you replace the voltage source, actual voltage source. That is, a voltage source is replaced by a short circuit. There is only the impedance is remain, and introduce the compensation voltage in a branch where you have to measure the current. So the polarity of the branch, current was flowing in this direction, so you have to oppose that direction, right? So this is how you put the compensation voltage with the new impedance, that is Z plus delta Z, which is now 2 ohms. Now, given that, now after some simplification, this circuit will look like this. So you have to find out this current. This current will now be your delta I, that is incremental current that you want to calculate. See, this is the equivalent. Sir, yeah.
Sir, here the resistance is decreased. That's why the current will, the incremental change delta I should be positive. So here the VC is, instead of opposing, it is aiding the direction of current.
No, you do not know actually what is your direction. See, the current was initially in this direction.
Yes.
So
sir.
your voltage source that you have to apply, it should be this. This
Yes,
is your
sir.
VC, right?
Yes, sir. Yes,
but your
sir.
VC itself have become negative.
Negative. So that's
So
why.
that's why this polarity will actually be changed.
Yes, sir.
So what it will do, it will add current. See, in this loop, it will
Yes,
add
sir.
current. So
Yes,
delta
sir.
will be positive, effectively.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Right?
Okay.
Understood?
Yes, sir.
So by notation, the VC should be positive and negative. You're right. But since VC itself have come negative, so this will again invert. Right? So what it will do, it will add to the current that is actually flowing in the loop. Okay?
Yes, sir.
So effectively what you will see, we're solving this circuit. We arrive at the same delta I. Okay. So instead of going through two sets of equations, solving for two sets of mesh equations, each of two equations each, you can simply obtain this equivalent circuit, right? And from this equivalent circuit, you can rightly say what is the incremental current. And from that, you can obviously get the current. Given the polarity here, you see the incremental current is positive, so actual current will be more. So this is the beauty of this compensation theorem. We do not have to solve for the circuit, because in the other case, you have to solve for the circuit twice. Once with the actual current, actual element, then second with the incremental or changed impedance or resistance, whatever element. So you have to solve the same circuit twice. But if you use this compensation theorem, there is no question of solving. You have to simply solve a particular loop equation to get the compensation current or the incremental current, right? So obviously this will be much more beneficial. Understood? So I'll give you some examples are given here, so you can try out and practice them. I guess, okay, there are some statements over here. I think that will help you understand it. Next, what you have is Millman's theorem. Let's open Millman's theorem. Now, in this case, in Millman's theorem, what we study is that if there are more than one sources, okay, connected in series or parallel, then what you can do, we can replace them by a unit source, right? Single source. Now, how this can be done? Given, suppose for the first case, say there are n number of independent voltage sources, they connected in parallel, each having an internal impedance. So ZEI source has an internal impedance ZI. So I varies from 1 to n. So obviously they are acting in series with the EMF. Now, then this can be replaced, this arrangement. Let me show you clearly. This is not coming clearly. This entire arrangement can be replaced by a single source like this. Okay, where this EMF, the effective EMF, will be given by, oh, this is not clearly visible, so I have to use some demagnification. Okay. So this EMF is nothing but summation of EI, YI. YI is the admittance of each of these elements divided by I equal to 1 to n, YI, the summation of all the admittances. And this effective impedance will be nothing but 1 upon summation of all the admittances. This is basically a very trivial thing. Okay, since you can simply add the sources in series or in parallel, keeping in mind their configuration. See, what I can do, you can simply convert them. Since they are in parallel, we know parallel currents are much more easier to handle. So what we can do, we can replace the voltage sources by their equivalent current sources, right? So for the first source, the current will be E1 by Z1, and this will be an impedance Z1, or you can say admittance. Since it is in parallel, it's better to write the admittance Y1. Now these currents are all in parallel. So what will be the effective current flowing from this time to this time? This terminal to this terminal, it will be summation of all these currents. So the net current will be this. If we go through this notation, so it will be summation EI into YI. Right? This is the effective current flowing from this terminal to this terminal. Since all the current sources are now in parallel. Now, what about the admittance? These admittances are all in parallel. So what about the total admittance? Sorry, I overshot that portion. See, the total admittance will be simply the summation of all the individual admittances, or the sum of individual impedances when taken inversion. So effectively, the entire circuit will be something like this. Again, a uniform current source, unique current source in parallel with an admittance. Now this can very easily be transformed into a voltage source, where the voltage will be I into Y by Y, sorry, and the impedance will be simply 1 by Y. So your effective impedance will be I into Z, the impedance, sorry, EMF. So I, we already seen this is I, and Z is nothing but 1 upon summation of all the admittances. So this is the EMF part. And what about the internal impedance? It is 1 upon summation of all the admittances. So this is what we already mentioned, that if the voltage sources are in parallel, so this is the effective impedance of an equivalent voltage source of n number of sources in parallel, obviously the independent sources, and this is the effective impedance with n number of independent voltage sources acting in parallel. So this is how you can replace a cluster of sources by an equivalent source, right? It is equally true for current source. We have seen that by changing it to the current source. Obviously, in a similar theorem can be stated for current sources which are connected in series. See, the current sources that are connected in series. So therefore, the effective current will be given by an unique or unit current source like this one with an admittance in parallel, where this current value will be given by this. Again is very trivial. I think you can solve it by yourself. Okay, this is the effective current values. Again, in this case, since these are in series, you know, voltage sources in series, the voltages accumulate. So cumulatively, you can find out the effective total voltage across these two terminals, if you consider this to be positive and negative, whatever. So if you can replace this by individual voltage sources, and effective terminal voltage across these two terminals will be summation of all the voltages, right? So following that same procedure, you can find out this current, effective current or equivalent current, and equivalent impedance or admittance, right? Or you can say, you can first replace this by an equivalent voltage source. This is the summation of all the voltages, I1 by Y1, I2 by Y2, IN by YN, then multiplied by, sorry, in series with an impedance, right? So I guess you can follow this very easily. So this source conversion may become very useful in situations where there will be plenty of sources. If you can convert them suitably to get voltage sources in series or current sources in parallel, then the effective or cumulative calculations will be much easier. This is again being proved. I will not go through that. See, sorry, this has been connected in series. The effective voltage sources after conversion. So the effective total voltage or EMF will be summation of these EMFs, simply this one. And once you get this, your effective current source will have current, this E divided by this equivalent Z. So that this Z will be given by, or Y will be given by this equation. So by this way, you can really convert the combination of voltage and current sources. So your basic objective will be to connect voltage sources in series in equivalence or current sources in parallel in equivalence, so that it can be accumulated using cumulative law or the superposition law. This is again is very trivial. Okay, so let's skip over to the next law. Say I'll go for the Taylor's theorem first, then I'll come to substitution theorem. No. The Taylor's theorem states that in any electrical network, in any electrical network, the sum of instantaneous power in all branches, this is instantaneous power. At any instant, sum of instantaneous power in all the branches is 0, provided the branch voltages satisfy the KVL and the branch current satisfy KCL at the node. So it should satisfy the KVL in a loop and it should satisfy KCL at any node. Given that conditions are satisfied, the total instantaneous power, if you consider in all the branches, should be equal to 0. Or in mathematical terms, for B number of branches, for K equal to 1 to B, this summation of Vk, Ik, instantaneous power would be ideally equal to 0. Now, how this can be proved? Let us see. And in other words, you can say that at any point of time, the instantaneous power that is being delivered from all the sources must be equal to the power that is being absorbed by all the passive elements in the circuit. That is, all the elements that are there in the circuit. Given a particular circuit, say like this, you have to first ensure that the KVLs are satisfied in the loops. Say first loop ABDF, ABDF. In this loop, you see this is a KVL equation. Write down the KVL equation. In the second loop, BCED, BCED. In this loop, write down the second KVL equation. This is the KVL equations. Then you have two nodes, three nodes actually. AB, two nodes. C can be also considered as a node, but there's an element there. So at different nodes, you write down the node equations. So you have two loop equations, KVL, and 3 KCL. Now, given these equations, now keeping these equations at hand, let us now find out the expression for instantaneous power in all the branches. So there are 5 branches. So effectively, the instantaneous power will be this, given by this, that is V1I1 plus V2I2 plus V3I3, V4I4 plus V5I5, sorry. Let's just get back to the circuit again. See, in every branch, there is a branch voltage and this is a current, V1I1. There is a branch voltage and this is a current, V2I2. The branch voltage, V3, current is I3. Similarly, the V4 branch voltage, branch current, branch voltage, branch current, right? So the Taylor's theorem says that V1I1 plus V2I2 plus V3I3 plus V4I4 plus V5I5 should be ideally equal to 0 instantaneous power. And we have assumed that it satisfies the KVL and KCL at the respective loops and nodes. So if we just expand this and substitute the value or the expressions that we obtained from KVL and KCL in the previous node and loop equations, then you see that effectively it will be 0. So total instantaneous power is indeed 0 for this particular circuit. So given any circuit, this can easily be proved, provided it satisfies the KVL and KCLs at respective positions. So this can be illustrated using different circuit configurations. So there are plenty of circuit configurations that are given. You can just go through them. Okay. So I'll not spend too much time on there. I'll quickly conclude the class by covering the last theorem. Let's just check Tellurian's theorem. Okay, there are some other examples of Tellurian's theorem. Last is the substitution theorem. In some of the situations, it becomes convenient to replace a particular impedance branch in a particular circuit with a different circuit component. That too, without disturbing the voltage current relationship in the entire network. That is, suppose you have a branch that contains some elements, you want to replace that elements by some other set of elements such that it doesn't affect the voltage current scenario in the entire network. That is, the relationship, the voltage current relationship is kept intact. So you should be choosing these new elements that might help you in solving the network problem very judiciously, so that all the network relations are kept intact. Let us see how that can be done. It seems very interesting. You can replace any branch of your choice by some elements that you wish were there. So any branch in a network can be substituted by a different branch without disturbing the voltage and current in the entire network. How that can be done? Consider the circuit. This is the circuit that we have. There's a voltage source, 1 ohm impedance, 2 ohm impedance, and there is this branch. Okay. Now, under normal operating condition, if you solve for this I2 is 2 ampere, and if it is 2 ampere, this Vxy, the voltage across this terminal, is 2 volt. So whatever you do to the circuit, whatever element you connect across these terminals, this current should be 2 ampere and this voltage should be 2 volt. Now you have to ensure that. If you can ensure that, then you can replace this resistance by different components. Suppose I want to replace that resistance. Just a minute, reduce it. I want to replace this resistance by this combination. Okay, or it has to be replaced by an impedance Z2 as an inductor without altering the circuit response. Now, if you can easily see that if we simply install or insert an inductor over here, the circuit parameters will change. So obviously it will have some effect. To counter that, what you can do, you have to incorporate a potential source or a EMF source or something E dash over here, so that the effect of this J2 is nullified and Vxy remains, the voltage across this remains 2 volt and current through it remains 2 ampere. So based on these conditions, you have to choose or calculate the value of this E dash with this given polarity. So what we're actually doing, we have to find out the value of this E dash such that even if after the introduction of this J2 or the inductance, the circuit components are such that the effective current flowing through this XY branch is 2 ampere and the voltage across this XY branch is 2 volts. So what should be the necessary equations? See, in a change or transformed circuit, your equation for Vxy is Ixy Zxy, this is impedance, plus this E dash. Right? So if you replace this E dash, we know that Vxy is 2 volt. We already decided that it should be 2 volt. And this current, it should again be 2 amperes. It should be again be 2 amperes. And this Zxy we know is Z2. So by solving this, you get the value of E dash. So this will be the value of E dash that you require to insert over here, such that this J2 will not affect the circuit current or the voltage. This is current through this branch or the voltage across these two terminals. Okay, understood? So by this way, you can replace this resistance that was there actually, that 1 ohm resistance that was there in original circuit, by a 2 ohm inductance. The inductor having impedance 2 ohms. Right? This is one replacement you can do. So there may be different forms of replacements that you can go for. Okay, say in this replacement, what I have done, I have just introduced a voltage source. If we just introduce a voltage source of 2 volt, see this XY branch is a property is replaced by a voltage source EXY, such that this voltage remains 2 volt and this current should remain 2 ampere. So to ensure that, you have to find out this value of EXY. So after much derivation, you can find out in few steps that the effective value of this EXY should be equal to 2 volt, such that the branch properties, there is a current through the branch or the potential across the branch remains same. I think it's very trivial. You can solve it for yourself, and that will keep as an assignment. You can solve it for yourself. But how this 2 volt is coming? Okay. So in other situations also, you can replace this 1 ohm by, say, this 2 volt, or a simply a 2 ampere source, since the current is 2 ampere, or a network configuration like this. Right? So first, if you are willing to get a resistance 0.5 ohm inserted instead of this 1 ohm, then what should be the circuit configuration? So you have to have a potential drop to counter the effect of this reduction in the resistance. You have to calculate that 1 volt. Okay, so you can simply, I guess, you can calculate all these configurations, right? What will happen? This knowledge or this understanding will help you, because you can replace any branch. Say this is the inductor branch, so you don't want to have this inductor branch, so you can replace that by a resistance with an impedance, with a voltage source, or a voltage by a voltage source, or by a current source with suitable values, such that it doesn't affect the network parameters, that is the branch currents and voltages, especially at that branch. Right? So these are the substitution theorem. Works. Actually, all the problems that have been discussed, I think these are all solved over here. This is 1 ohm case. This is a 2 ampere case. All the cases are solved over here. It's 2 volt case. Okay. So coming back to the course or the theorems that you have to cover, we have covered reciprocity theorem, compensation theorem, Millman's theorem, intelligence theorem, and substitution theorem. And I have given some problems over here. I will provide you with more tutorials whenever necessary. Any question so far? I've already provided you the notes. Okay, we have the notes with you.